Now, we've told you this before. I'll tell you it again because it's really important for this story, that children without a serious medical condition, the dangers of severe COVID is so low as to be difficult to quantify. The risk of long COVID for children, a source of fear among many parents, is also very low. Where does that come from? The New York Times, which is funded by Big Pharma, which is why you can believe that when they're saying something that's negative about Big Pharma or their interests. According to the CDC, among children, the mortality risk from COVID-19 is actually lower than from the flu, from the New York Intelligencer. So that children have a greater risk from the flu than they do from COVID. Keep that in mind. As we read this story from NBC News, which is 100% propaganda fear-mongering, okay? I'm telling you what they're not telling you. And then people that are funded by Bill Gates do fact checks on our show, and oh no, it's not actually 100%. So we're checking them. They don't check us. And so here it is. Child COVID hospitalizations are up, especially in 5 states. Look at the subheadlining on this. Children have been hospitalized at nearly twice the rate of adults in the past 4 weeks, an NBC News data analyst. So wow, I didn't know that COVID is hospitalizing, because that's what that says, right? In the last 4 weeks, this is from that article with that headline. In the last 4 weeks, the average number of children hospitalized with COVID-19 jumped 52%. From a low of 1,270 on November 29th to 1,933 on Sunday, according to the NBC News analyst and Department of Health and Human Services data. Really? In the same time period, adult COVID hospitalizations increased 29%, suggesting that pediatric hospitalizations rose nearly twice the rate. So if you're reading this, you're like, oh my God, kids are getting made sick by COVID like crazy. Twice the rate as adults. The number of kids hospitalized with COVID has more than doubled in 10 states, as well as in D.C., Puerto Rico. The data does not specify whether the children were vaccinated or vaccine eligible. Uh-huh. Wait a minute. Spoiler alert. 9 paragraphs in, this is what they say. So they do 8 paragraphs of scaring the shit out of you. And then the 9th paragraph, watch how they hide the truth. They slip it in. This is NBC News. Ready? We test anybody who's admitted to the hospital for whatever reason to see whether or not they have COVID. And we're definitely seeing an increase in cases. However, we're really not seeing an increase in children who are hospitalized for COVID or in the intensive care unit for COVID. That's in the 9th paragraph. That's NBC News propagandizing you. Are you happy? And by the way, this will never get taken down from YouTube. That'll never get censored at Twitter for misleading, misinformation, scaremongering. That'll never get a flag at Facebook or Instagram. Why? Because the places that fact check those things are funded by Bill Gates and Big Pharma. So it'll never get. So you can lie all you want about COVID as long as it's going to make you get a vaccine. Then those lies aren't lies. If whatever they lie about scares you into getting more scared of COVID, that's not a lie. Can you believe this shit?
Can I see that headline again?
I'm going to show you the headline.
Because people are not...
Child COVID hospitalizations are up, especially in children have been hospitalized at nearly twice the rate as adults. From COVID? From COVID? No. We're not seeing an increase in children who are hospitalized from COVID. No. Let's go. What else did they say in this? In general, pediatric COVID cases are mild compared with those of adults, but kids can develop serious complications, including long COVID and an inflammatory syndrome that reaches several organs called MIS-C. The syndrome is most common in children ages 5 to 11. In recent days, New York has seen a particularly notable increase, putting more parents on high alert. What? Parents are on high alert for COVID that is Less of a threat to their kids than the flu? Are you fucking shitting me? Or is that just something you want people to think? Or maybe they are scared because you scared them. The New York State Department of Health sent a notice to physicians on Christmas Eve, warning of an upward trend in pediatric hospitalizations. The notice did not specify the number of children hospitalized, but it said New York City admissions rose fourfold during that time period. Do you see how they try to? They're still trying to scare the shit out of you. And let me remind you, what is Omicron? Here it is.
Top 5 Zoe reported symptoms. So this is the early London data, right? Most common, runny nose. Second most common, headache. Third most common, fatigue. Sometimes the fatigue was bad, sometimes it was mild. Fourth most common feature, sneezing. Fifth most common feature, sore throat. The implication is obvious. If you have any of these and you've had colds in the past, you're going to think it's a cold, but it may well not be. It may be a Omicron cold. Need to get tested.
Here's how NBC lies about. Now, I told you that children have a greater risk of dying from the flu than than COVID. Watch how NBC, I showed you this before.
NBC senior medical correspondent, Dr. John Torres. Dr. Torres, good morning to you. As Kathy mentioned, that new poll finds about 2/3 of parents are hesitant to get their kids the shot. What is your advice to alleviate some of their concerns?
And Joe, you're right. There is that hesitancy to get the shot, and it's a hesitancy that parents typically have because they're very protective of their child. A couple of things I tell them is, one, from a community perspective, children right now are 25% of the cases that are out there. That's from a community perspective, but parents are more worried about their own child. So here are some numbers for their child. Last week, 118,000 children ended up with Pfizer. Since the pandemic, over 8,000 have been hospitalized, a third of those in the ICU, and unfortunately, there have been 146,000 deaths, which according to...
So he's making that up. He's making that up. That's all just made up. I don't know where he got any of that on any of those numbers from. That's all made up. That's all made up to scare you. You want to hear how he keeps going on to scare you? Watch this.
And so I would say, look at those stats because it's important to understand that if your child gets COVID, that could be devastating with lifelong consequences.
So do you see how they're scaring the shit out of you? Do you see that's their point? Why? You might as well be getting a news report right from Pfizer. That guy might as well be. So instead of Pfizer giving the money to his boss and then the boss cutting him a check, they might as well just send it right to him. They might as well just set up a TV studio at Pfizer's offices because that's what this is, 100% lying propaganda. And this has not been taken down by YouTube because so you could lie at the behest of Big Pharma all you want and YouTube will never do a goddamn thing about it. But YouTube will come after me dishonestly, which is what they have done. I'm here to debunk them. And YouTube and Google, as we know, are part of the establishment. They're in bed with the intelligence community. They're in bed with Big Pharma. They're in bed with they are the establishment. There's no more profitable company in the world than Google. So you can lie all you want at the behest of the establishment on YouTube, but you can't tell the truth that debunks them on YouTube. Just so you know that. I got in trouble for telling the truth on YouTube. Of course you do. Of course you do. Look what they did to RFK Jr. And you want to know why they got rid of the dislikes? Because when they do a segment about COVID, the establishment news, people downvoted 5,000 downvotes to 600 likes for that very thing I just showed you from NBC, that report. That's why they got rid of the downvotes. Because they knew they can't keep this going. They can't keep this fear-mongering shit going about COVID without getting rid of the dislikes. And they're not, this is still up. This video is still up. They're never going to take it down. Because they're lying at the behest of the establishment.
Is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch sponsored by Pfizer.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer. Making a difference. brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
This weather report brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press Data Download, brought to you by Pfizer.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer. On how to find the hidden sugars in the American family diet. Sponsored by Pfizer.
We can play that all day. And now you know the rest of the story. And now you know why NBC News is straight up lying to you and scaremongering you and feeding you 100% propaganda. Now you know, because they're bought. Hey, we're doing live stand-up shows in Los Angeles on the 7th and 14th of January, and then we're going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Philadelphia. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets.